Hello, everybody, and welcome to Catalyst of Change. I'm Alexia Cito, and I am absolutely honored and excited for our guest today, who is joining us. And we're going to be diving into female empowerment. We're going to be diving into life journey, to lots of good things. And her name is Karen. I want to welcome you and thank you so much for coming all this way and joining us on Catalyst of Change.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, I would love to start with a little bit about just if you want to share with us, what is your mission? What is your vision? What do you feel like is your path and purpose and what you're here to do right now with everybody watching and listening?
Oh, that's a big one. My mission is to empower 5,000 women. Sorry, 5 million women. Simply because I'm very much aware that when you empower a woman, you empower her children, and then they enable others to be empowered. So, yeah. And for me, empowerment involves not just empowering the woman to be able to be the best she can be, but it's about spreading the message out and ensuring that more and more women claim their place in this world.
This, first of all, is so needed. And this is a topic we've touched on with a few of our guests on Catalysts of Change. And it's one I feel we cannot touch on enough, like until we reach this place. And we are far from it if you look at the global scale of women. So I would love to know first, when you say women acclaim their place, what exactly does that mean for you?
Okay, well, I'll share a bit about my journey as to how I claimed my place, because then it might make it more understandable. I was traumatized as a child, but didn't know that until I was 50 years old. So in those years, I was restricting myself continually from being the best I could be. It was only when I started to unravel everything that had happened in my life did I start to understand quite how much I'd handed my power over to other people, specifically my family, unfortunately, and also to abusive partners. Consequently, by unraveling my story, I began to understand that everything connects. So although I felt I was doing well, in actual fact, my health suffered, my wealth suffered, my relationships suffered. And just overall, even though people assumed I was confident, there was a little girl in me going, I don't want to stand here and do this. I just want to go and hide. So to me, it's letting that little girl feel safe. And when she feels safe, she will start to really stand out and speak for herself, which so many women need to do. Really, it's something that I'm quite passionate about, encouraging women to just claim their voice.
Wow, yes, exactly. And you touched on a lot just now that I feel like is really, really vital for us as we are. I think as women, we have sort of, and without, I don't want to generalize, but at the same time, we do have experiences that perhaps between us, we can understand something that impacts us. And you mentioned, for example, this trauma from childhood, then being connected to all these actions in adulthood. And not just actions of yourself, but those that you receive and accept from others. And how do you feel like if someone's listening right now and they might be in that phase of their journey where they're hearing what you're saying and they're realizing maybe I'm doing that? Like maybe, I'm having this situation that I feel stuck in. What would you tell that person right now?
For me, the best thing I could have possibly done was to stop listening to other people. Start listening to what is important to you.
And how do you feel like for you on your journey? You said when you reached 50, and so what was that like for you? How did you actually have that realization? And then how did you practice listening to that inner voice?
The realization came about because I was working with a coach who said to me quite innocently, "What would you love in your life?"
Mm.
And I just, out the blue, said, "I'd love to hear my parents tell me they loved me and actually give me a hug." And at 50 years old, I hadn't realised they'd never really done that. It was so normal not to have their expression of love or to have a hug from them that I didn't even question it. But I would give my friends hugs. I would tell them I loved them. But so there was an absolute disconnect between family and friends. And in that realization that that is what I wanted, I then started to question everything about my life. And basically, it was like I was focusing so much on serving my family that I'd forgotten myself. And it was only when I started to recognize myself did I start to change my life.
And what did those changes start to look like for you?
I started to say no. I stopped listening to my abusive partner and started to stand up to him, knowing that potentially I could end up being hit. However, it was almost like in standing up for myself, I made him step back.
Wow.
Because there was this part of me that was going, no, I'm not accepting this anymore. This has got to change. And we pick up on other people's reactions, even if it's subconsciously. And he was obviously picking up on the fact that I was saying to him, no more. Even if I was only saying it in my head to myself, he was picking up on that. So he started to step back. And it was like I had this sudden freedom of I could say something and not be fearful of a reaction that had always been there. So yes, that was a big, big shift for me. And then I noticed that other people started to respond to me differently because I'd actually spoken up for myself.
Wow. This is like revolutionary. Like it takes a lot of courage, and especially in situations where like your life could be at risk. And to step up, like that's like being on the front lines in a war zone. Like that's a serious, serious situation.
Absolutely. And what I would say to any woman that's even considering stepping up and saying no, protect yourself first. It does not matter how much you want to say no. You have to be safe yourself.
Yeah.
But when you have this deep urging inside that says no more, you can't ignore it. And there's a force behind your desire to be seen and heard in a way that you've never been seen or heard before. So just one no, even to just somebody who you would normally say yes to, who isn't a threat to you, will start you realizing that you matter. And the most important person is you.
Yeah. And you know, I'm curious what that was like for you starting to say no. As a recovering people pleaser myself, you know, I have been through these phases of saying no where it's like almost like saying no remorse. It's like after the no, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. All these, like this noise, like, you know, so what was it like for you? Like when you actually first started acting on that, what was that like?
Truthfully, it felt as though somebody had given me, I would say, I'm trying to visualize how it felt at the time, because it felt as though somebody had given me a flower bud. And it was like this flower was gradually opening each time I said no. There was like another sort of bit of the bud opening up, to the point where it got that I was willingly saying no and not beating myself up for saying no, because I could see that I was physically changing as each no was spoken. And it was fascinating to recognize that change in me. That just from saying no occasionally and then saying no more often, I stopped worrying what they would think about me. It did not matter anymore, because in saying no, I was actually doing good to myself rather than them continually.
Right.
So it was, as I say, like a flower opening, a bud opening.
Yes. And why do you think it's like, what about this is so important for women?
We are taught to give. And I recognise with my parents that they were never taught to express love. So for my part, it was recognising that it wasn't their fault. And it wasn't my fault that I landed up in abusive relationships. It's because that was what I was looking for, love. But I didn't know there was different kinds of love. And in that searching, it was like, how do you put it? A realization that life is to be lived.
And how has it been now for you in that space of living life?
I'm a totally different person. Absolutely, totally different. If you'd met me 2 years ago, you would not recognize me now. I enjoy life. I ensure that I give a lot more to others because I am more fulfilled in myself. I take risks that perhaps I wouldn't have done. Like I did a trip to Egypt on my own.
Wow.
Into the desert with 2 guides that I'd never actually met, apart from speaking to on the phone over WhatsApp. Arriving in Egypt, which is male-dominated land.
Yes.
With no phone, no cash.
Wow.
And no language.
Wow.
And I walked out the airport and I was greeted by 3 gentlemen who said, "Can we help you?" And it was a case of, "Yes, please." Whereas normally I'd have said no, but I didn't feel threatened in any way by stepping out and saying yes. They were unbelievably helpful. And I realised as I travelled through the desert with the 2 guides, that I didn't trust men originally. And now all of a sudden I'm trusting men and I'm giving them responsibility of my life. And it was like, I wouldn't have done that previously.
And what was your journey like? Like, how was it like to be in such a circumstance? Like, no cash, no phone. You're in the desert in Egypt with these 2 guides. Like, what was that journey like?
Beautiful.
Wow.
Best journey I could have done for myself. It taught me a lot about myself because we're continually learning about ourselves. And it was like, it allowed me to really explore what was important to me. I'd obviously done exploration of my future, but in stepping up into that space and just being with these 2 men, it was like I was treated as a woman. I was respected as a woman. There was never any underlying question of am I safe or anything like that. Never any of that. And they made sure that I felt safe as well. And we had a laugh. We had an absolute enjoyable time. The first night, a little desert fox turned up.
Oh, wow.
We landed up walking up ruins that I said to them at the time, you could have warned me. I had the tightest pair of jeans on going, and they took me up these steps that I could barely step up. So we had such a laugh, and they took me to the sea, and we just sat and watched the sunset and things like that. And there was never any threat to me at all. For the first time ever, I felt respected as a woman.
Wow.
By a man.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's why I say you take risks once you realise you are important.
It sounds like a completely like new dimension of life, like a whole new experience of life. And, Before we started this, we were briefly connecting on the idea of victimizing ourselves. And I'm curious for you to share a little bit on that, because I feel like when we victimize ourselves, we can lose out on a lot of opportunities in our life, such as this. If we feel like we're in this place and we're not valued, or the world's against us, our world can feel very small and closed rather than expansive, and something like we have these opportunities to go after, such as this extraordinary journey, into the depths of the desert of Egypt with these beautiful guides. Like, that takes so much courage and willingness to just step out and like be who you are. And I feel like if you were in that place of like a victim, then you may have not been able to step into something like that. So I'm just wondering your perspective on that, because the little you shared with me was really powerful.
Never see yourself as a victim. If you see yourself as a victim, you're continually allowing somebody else to dictate to you on what you can do and what you can't do. In being a survivor, you're actually opening yourself up to so many more opportunities, simply because you're changing how you perceive yourself. A victim says that I cannot do this because. A survivor says, I can do this and I will do this. If you look at the victims of women's abuse, they can either restrict their lives and continue to fear being abused, or they can make a choice that says, I'm not prepared to accept this anymore. I'm choosing to step away from this. And in stepping away from it, you're actually giving yourself permission to explore so many other possibilities. So for me, being a victim was never an option. And even before I knew about my relationship with my parents, I'd never classed myself as a victim, despite having been through 2 abusive relationships. I never saw myself as a victim, because I realized that if I gave myself that victimhood, I was actually giving my power away to those people instead of being within myself.
Mm-hmm.
So no, being a victim was never an option and should never, ever be an option. No matter how abusive the relationship is, you always have a choice on how you respond to it emotionally, mentally, and physically. But you have to remember, it's your choice how you respond, because nobody else has control over our emotions except ourselves. Nobody else has control over our bodies except ourselves. So why would you give somebody else that control?
Mm-hmm. And, for someone who might be in a situation like that and they feel like, how could I say this, and that, if they're trapped, maybe financially or in what other ways, but what I'm hearing is that even in those circumstances, there may be a really, sacrifice that needs to be made, or something that will change, but that there's still like a crack of light. Like there's still some way that you can make a choice that could liberate you. Is that what I'm hearing? Or could you expand on that a little bit, especially as someone who has been through that?
Of course. No matter where you are in a relationship, no matter where you are in being abused, you have to recognize that you don't need to stay.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start looking at what you really want. In bringing awareness that you can make a different choice, you then start to realize there are options available to you that you have not seen previously. We often think that I can't move financially. There's always somebody you can go and talk to. I can't get out of this relationship because. But actually, what other options are available? What can you do? Even one tiny change can start to create change. It's perhaps not being quite so willing to accept what's going on in your life in your own mind. Because once you make a change in your mind, your body starts to respond to that change. And we are body, mind, soul, not mind, body, soul. Mm-hmm. Our body is our relationship with ourselves. When your body starts to feel that it has some options to start feeling safe, it will start letting the mind find those options. It's what you feel inside that matters more than anything. And if you start believing that you deserve more, your body responds and you start opening yourself up to seeing far more than you've ever seen before.
This is so, so powerful because it really is like that awareness. It's like that, you know, when you, it's just super simple, but it's like when someone says something, oh, you know, I really love this red car. And then you always see that red car like more and more and more, or this. So it's like just even opening up that possibility, they literally start manifesting and coming into life, which is so, so beautiful. And you've worked with a lot of women, empowering them, supporting through all the work that you do. And I'd love to hear if there's anyone in particular that, you know, a story that you feel called to share, or a memory of like a person that you've guided through some kind of a transformation and supported them in that way.
The one that stands out the most was a young lady who has a young daughter, and she had MS. Among other illnesses. And unfortunately, her life had reached that point where she was spending so much time chained basically to her bed because she had no energy. Her daughter was suffering. She came to me and we went through just one session initially because she wanted to try it. Because she'd tried so many other forms of healing, I suppose, and they hadn't worked for her. I work with clients at the level that is at the soul level, so I take them to connect back to their true selves. And it's not hypnotherapy, it's nothing like that. I just get them to connect back to their heart, and in their heart is a tiny little girl. Don't know what she looks like or anything like that. I just get them to give her a cuddle, a hug, to tell her she's loved. And let them feel that hug back and hear her say, I love you. The shift it creates because they suddenly realise they're not alone. And in doing that, it allowed her to realise that everything she'd been through had a purpose, and that was to teach her whatever she needed to learn, that she'd chosen to learn, because we all come here with a purpose, and that is to learn something and to grow. In learning what she needed to learn, she was then able to acknowledge that her illness, MS, and other aspects of her illnesses were because she was still refusing to learn the lessons she'd chosen to learn. In doing that, she started to heal herself naturally. And she, within 3 months, had lost over 3 stone.
Wow.
And she'd gone cold water swimming.
Wow.
From MS to cold water swimming. That's in huge. 3 months. And she'd also met the man of her life.
Oh, wow.
And that's from somebody who was stuck in bed, having been abused by her parents and her partners, to being loved, to being healthy, and living on purpose.
Wow, that's so powerful. What's it like for you, you know, witnessing that?
It's phenomenal. I just love it. I just love hearing from the women I work with who just say to me, I did this and I did this. And it's like the surprise in their voice that they'd actually done something that they've always wanted to do. Or knew they wanted to do, but never trusted themselves enough to be able to do it. It's a phenomenal feeling. It really, really is. But to me, that's the biggest reward I can have.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. And it's so, so beautiful and special. And, there's so much in what you shared, like the founder of the Love, Peace, Harmony Foundation. He has this saying, heal the soul first, and healing of everything will follow. And so it's so beautiful to hear exactly this process that you're doing and the amazing results that it's bringing to people. And, one of our guests had this, Dr. Justina Mutale. She works a lot with women's empowerment. She has a book, The Iconic Leadership and the Art of Leadership for Women. And she spoke about this quote, this statistic, and I was like, blew my mind. And she was talking about how in the whole world, all the governments, everybody in power, that 7% are women. So, which is, one digit out of a potential 3. It's just wild to me. But what I'm hearing in your sharing and the empowerment and, saying no, putting ourselves first, and all of these things is like getting women to that place of being in a place of empowerment in their life. And it also makes me think, like, what could that do for the world? The more and more and more of us that actually stand in that in our lives. And so my curiosity for you, we have one last question that we ask all of the guests. And it is, if you could be a catalyst of change for one thing in the world right now, what would that be?
To educate women that they have a choice. They do not have to follow the old rules. That will make a big difference in their lives if they stop following the old rules. It's made a huge difference in my life alone. Just in 2 years of stopping following the old rules, of giving constantly to my family, my time and energy, and claiming back my life.
So powerful and so needed. And, it's really, I find also very inspiring because you're a living embodiment of this. And you're also showing women and people, like, this can happen at any point in our life. This does not have to happen at any age, at any stage. Like, this can happen anytime. And before we close, you also had mentioned something about transformation and the time it takes to achieve transformation. And that's what I also, it's just coming to me back right now, is I'm curious your thoughts on that.
If anyone's been abused or traumatized, you don't need to go back into that trauma. You don't need to go back to the stories you've created. You do not need to step back into them. And it doesn't need to take months or years. I work with clients in a 90-minute session, and I will say to them, by the end of that session, you will have changed your life. And they do. It can be a matter of seconds even. It's just a case of recognizing that there's no need to continue to repeat the same patterns, to keep repeating the same stories to yourself, or to keep saying to yourself, I'm too old, or it's not possible for me. And that's what makes me so sad with a lot of the women I speak with, is they do not believe that they can get past their trauma. But everyone can get past their trauma. It's only by starting to take that first step and reaching out for help that you can get past that trauma. But please don't keep going back into the trauma. It just makes it worse. And it's not necessary.
Yes. Well, I really want to thank you for bringing that forward, because it's a really, really, I think it's a illuminating message. It's one that reminds us that transformation, healing doesn't always have to be long and hard. It can actually just happen naturally and happen quickly. And that's a beautiful perspective and one that really deeply resonates. So I want to thank you for that. And also thank you for being a catalyst of change in the world and being a stand for women, for empowerment, for abundance, for this amazing, stepping into our fullest potential and discovering what that even is or what that even means and living it and being it and shining that for the world. So thank you for being with us today and for sharing.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Me too. And I want to thank everybody who has been listening and watching for joining us today, and also invite you to check out in the description all of Karen's amazing work. And please share with us in the comments anything that resonated for you. We want to hear all that you were feeling, thinking, what was coming up for you, anything that resonated. And like, comment, share, subscribe if this does resonate for you. And of course, continue to be catalysts of change in your lives, communities, and the world in your own unique ways. We will see you in the next episode.